Good Erev Shabbos. Hope you're having an awesome day. So this week's Torah portion, we read the last 3 plagues that God brought upon Egypt in order to get them to allow the Jewish people to go free. And the last plague is the plague of the death of the firstborn, which Pharaoh was one of them himself. And the rabbis say that God tells Moses, at midnight exactly, as the time strikes midnight, all the firstborns will die. But yet when Moses speaks to Pharaoh, he doesn't say that. He says about midnight. Why doesn't he say at midnight? And the rabbis say God, who knows how to be accurate about every moment, said at midnight because he meant at the moment. But Moses was worried that Pharaoh and the skeptics would see, and if their clock would be wrong, they would say, oh, it was 11:59, it was 12:01, it was 12:05, it wasn't exactly in the moment, and they would say, it's not God, we don't believe it. So Moses wanted to avoid those skeptics and then being able to have an excuse. He said about midnight. But the rabbis ask a basic question. I don't understand. Pharaoh just saw the 10 plagues that God did and gave to the Egyptians. Remarkable miracles one after the other. Blood for everyone. The frogs, the hail and the fire together, the darkness, the locusts, the wild animals, the death of the animals. I mean, you go on and on. The plagues were so powerful. Would Pharaoh be a skeptic when God kills the firstborns because it was a minute earlier or a minute later? Yet God did everything? And the answer the rabbis give is a very important one, especially in our life. And they say like this. The truth is, don't we all do the same? Don't we see remarkable miracles in our life? Happenings, remarkable human beings, things that are unreal. Yet we nitpick on one thing we find and say, it can't be God because look at this. You see people who are full of faith and do remarkable and say, but look at that weak point in them. We nitpick, and instead of seeing the big picture, we look at the one little thing. And the same things with our friends, with our family, with our spouses, with our co-workers, bosses, or the people that work for us. They could be the most remarkable people. And instead of seeing the whole person and all the good, we nitpick on the one little thing that might be imperfect. Says God to us. And that's the message he's teaching us with Pharaoh. Don't be like Pharaoh. Pharaoh, although he saw 10 plagues that were the most miraculous possibilities ever, it says not even one slave was able to leave Egypt, yet the Jews went out in the middle of the day. He still remained a skeptic because he would find one thing that was a minute earlier or a minute later. And that's why Moses had to say about midnight, because he didn't want to give Pharaoh another excuse to be a skeptic. Says the Torah does, don't be that way. Not with God, not with your faith, not with your spouse, not with your family, not with the people around you. Skeptics don't get anywhere. Of course, it's good to have a healthy dose of skepticism and not to believe everything. But you need to trust your faith and you need to see the majority, not the little detail. You know, today was the liberation of Auschwitz, and therefore it's International Holocaust Day. The worst atrocity to ever plague this world and the Jewish people. Something unfathomable and unthinkable even till today. And as we commemorate Holocaust International Day, and as we think about this talk I just told you from Moses, it reminds you of a remarkable story from Simon Wiesenthal, who was one of the most amazing human beings who hunted down Nazis his entire life. After himself being in the concentration camp in Mauthausen, he spent the rest of his life dedicated to hunting down Nazis, and he started the organization, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which literally made sure that no one should go unpunished and should not be caught in the long arm of retribution and paying back for all they did. And he says the story how when he was in Mauthausen and they were liberated, and Rabbi Silver, who was this remarkable rabbi from London, came and was giving out siddurs, books to the Jewish people that were there, the people that survived. And he came to Simon Wiesenthal and wanted to give him a siddur. And Simon would look at the prayer book and he says, I'll never touch this. I'll never pray. Looking for a reaction from Rabbi Silver. Rabbi Silver says to him, why? And he says, when we came to Mauthausen, there was one man who came with a siddur. Now this man, at first I was so inspired. He smuggled a siddur, a prayer book. He smuggled it into the concentration camp. People couldn't take anything. And he inspired me. But then I watched how people begged him to use his siddur, and he would rent it to them. He refused to give it to them to pray only if they paid him with some of their bread. He said, how could a person be so vicious to take away a person's bread in order to allow him to pray? And I made up, I'll never ever pray again. And Rabbi Silver hugs him and embraces him, and the standing is pain. But then he looks at me and says, I have a question for you. Why are you focusing on the one guy who charged people to use his prayer book, and it was so calculated and ruthless in taking away the last piece of bread, instead of looking at all those human beings who gave away the last piece of bread just to be able to pray, just to be able to speak to God? My friends, that's the message that God tells us with Pharaoh. Don't look at the one guy. Don't look at the one thing that's not perfect. Don't be a skeptic on God, on religion, on faith, on human beings because of the one imperfect thing. Look at the 99% of the 90% that's good, that inspires you to have faith. Shabbat Shalom. And if you're in town, come tomorrow at the shul, 10 a.m. By 12, we're at Kiddush. We have a remarkable Kiddush, the best challah and scotch. Whatever you want, come join us. Some herring, l'chaim, and Shabbat Shalom.